We're here this morning with Diana Martinez, a local organizer, who is the current agricultural director for Chicks Ahoy. Can you tell me a little bit about the mission of Chicks Ahoy?
So Chick-fil-A Farm is an organization that was born at the intersection of food insecurity and the criminal justice system. We have known forever that wherever people are experiencing food insecurity, they're also experiencing the failures of our social safety net. So housing insecurity, over incarceration, homelessness, and those kinds of issues. And so our goal is to, in a state like Connecticut, where 98% of farmers are white, create new farmers of color in spaces that have been most marginalized by the failures of our social safety net. And by that way, feed people, support agribusiness development, and get to people's kitchen tables where they're also talking about all the other things that affect them and organize those kitchen tables. So that's our end goal, is to create systems change both in the food systems and all the other systems that affect our communities. So.
And to that point, I know that you're a resident of the North End, in the Miller Street area. And through your efforts, you've created the Miller Street Community Farm.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about how that happened, first of all? Because I know it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy path.
No, it wasn't easy. I've lived in Middletown for since 2005. I've lived in the North End now for a good large amount of that time. And when we started talking about farming, we recognized all of the roadblocks that people have expressed to us experiencing when they try and start a farm, especially in an urban space. Access to resources, access to land. And so Miller Street really started as a community research project. We were looking at, okay, if we are to start our own farms, what are the different ways that we could do that? And so some of us had access to land we already owned and started growing in those spaces. Some of us started um, purchasing land that's either agricultural land already or urban land, or wetlands, and practicing farming in those spaces. And I went the route of looking for a lease and a partnership with the city as an avenue. And part of this was us like figuring out what are all the different ways that we could do this, and then do we meet the same roadblocks along the way? And we did.
First of all, the area that we're talking about was is kind of isolated,
Yeah,
and certainly the whole North End is a food desert.
absolutely. The North End is a food desert. This particular area of the North End is even more isolated because of its physical location underneath the Portland Bridge, between two train tracks, kind of in this pocket. It's really difficult to drive to if you wanted to put it in your navigation system. But that also had been disinvested in for many, many years by the city of Middletown and the state. And in 1999, they were, the city council decided to demolish the entire neighborhood. They said it was blighted, and they gave everyone notice of eminent domain and said they were going to come in and and, you know, take over the community and tear it down, but they never did. They said they destroyed a few, they demolished a few structures, and then they ran out of money, and haven't really done anything with the community since then, except for recently closing the highway entrance to Route 9. So there's a city park in that space that few people know exist. It's a Middletown city park. It's called Roosevelt Park. And when we were looking for space to start a community farm, it just rung like the perfect place. One, there's a pocket of people in this neighborhood who exist and nobody knows that they're still there. And it's a beautiful space that we could then invest some time and energy into growing food in, for the neighbors that live there, with the neighbors that live there, and then use that as a way to organize around the things the community needs and wants.
It is a community garden that everyone's effort goes into um, working the farm, and then they also reap the benefits of being able to use the food that's grown there.
Absolutely. So it's a public park. So our lease is very clear that it remains a public space. it's been important for us to get people to go in it and look at it and also grab food and pick what they want. Everything we produce on the farm is free to everyone who lives in the neighborhood or who comes by. And this year we have expanded, we have built out raised beds out of concern for soil quality in the neighborhood because we were told the community was blighted. We also had the soil tested and it's not bad. But we built out raised beds either way. And we're talking 32-foot long raised beds. We now have 4 of those producing food, and we have community members who are part of our membership team, part of our leadership team, and also on our board. And we have very much like committed to not just the farm itself, but the ecosystem around it, and making sure that the wetland space around it is also in consideration for what we're thinking about and planning, and that the community is part and leads the decision making processes there. I think in many ways, the community farm is an ecosystem in the same way that our communities are. Except that for me, like farms are very manufactured. Someone is responsible for coming in and putting in seed and putting in seedlings and transplanting them and watering and growing and harvesting. And in our communities, we hold our governments and our systems responsible for that in the same kind of way. And so I can come into Miller Street and account for, okay, the bees are going to pollinate the plants are going to grow well, but when things don't work, I don't blame the plants for not growing or the chickens for getting eaten, right? I have to think about what did we do as a collective that created the conditions where this happened this way. And I think we think of our organizing in the same way. So when we're looking at communities, we're not blaming people for poverty or their felony convictions or things that exist in their ecosystem. We're saying, all right, where in our universe and our systems was there a breakdown, and how do we change that system so that you could produce better fruit?
I want to thank you for all that you do, and I want to congratulate you on receiving a certificate of environmental appreciation from the Rockall Foundation.
Yeah.
And I look forward to presenting it to you at the 90th celebration.
Thank you so much. I also just want to thank you and Rockfall for keeping your eye on what's moving and shaking here in town and really recognizing the work that folks on the ground are doing in a really grassroots, holistic way. Yeah, it's really important for organizations like Rockfall to exist and to partner with community in the ways that you have demonstrated.
No,
So I'm really
very much.
grateful.
Thank you very much.